here. Go into here. Perfect. Okay. All right. And then let's share my screen. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Transformative Tears, a Masterclass. I am Coach Lacy. For those of you who don't know me, I am a certified integrative health coach with experience working in naturopathic medicine since 2008. I work beside the beautiful and brilliant Dr. Tara Winston, teaching our clients how to exit the medical matrix and become the best version of themselves. As one of my previous mentors likes to say, we assist people in the process of transformation, one breath, one step, and one bite at a time. Together, Dr. Tara and I make up the team at Earth Naturopathic Wellness Center in Wenatchee, Washington, 3 hours east of Seattle. If you've joined us live, I am so glad that you're here. Thank you for coming. We'll probably have some more people joining us as time goes on. But if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, thank you for participating. And if you're watching a replay, just have a hashtag replay at the bottom. So thank you again for taking time out of your busy day to join us. I look forward to each of you sharing your stories of grief and loss as we move through these 3 days together. We will have many opportunities to share during this class, but if you feel called to chime in, please raise your hand. There's a button down there that you can hit to raise your hand if you have a question. So this is an interactive session. This is helping you to gain hope and clarity with tangible tools that you can use throughout your lifetime, even if you decide not to join our 8-week group coaching program. That being said, this 3-day masterclass, it's not a sales pitch. I want you to leave here feeling like you gained something from this class. So if you find value in what's being brought to the table here, I hope that you'll join our 8-week group coaching program following these 3 days. So if you're interested in that anytime during this masterclass, just message me afterward. And this is the last time I'm really going to mention it during the masterclass, except for the end. I will have a Q&A on day 3 for those of you who want to know more. I will provide the details when we're finished with these 3 days. So let's go ahead and get down to business, shall we? So what prompted me to do this today? So those of you who know me already, you know my story, and I apologize. It's kind of a long one, so I'm only going to tell bits and pieces during these 3 days together. Can you see my screen, Lori? Okay, great. So today I'm sharing my brother's story. It's his 7th anniversary of his passing. He's right here with the big smile on his face. So I apologize if I start crying. This story is really difficult for me to share, even though I've shared it many, many times. And I want to be respectful of any of my family who's watching. So I'm sorry if this becomes triggering for you. I apologize if this becomes triggering for you. This grieving process is different. It's different for us all, and I am more extroverted in my grief. So sometimes my vocal nature is not always appreciated by those who are not vocal. So to pay tribute to my brother and raise awareness for suicide, I have chosen to continue to be vocal. So I'm sharing a slideshow with you guys so that you can connect more to my story. So my brother Hunter, right here, was born on the 3rd of July. Well, both of them, the twins, were born on the 3rd of July, 1998, to my father Bill and my stepmom Charmin. My brother was the firstborn twin. He was born naturally, while his identical twin here, Cody, was a C-section. My stepmom was only 19 when they were born, and my dad was like 37, and I here was 15-year-old girl. So I met the boys a year after they were born. I came to visit my dad in the summertime. I lived in Wyoming with my mom. My dad had two other children, my brother Zach, who was born when I was 5, and my sister Whitney. This is Zach, this is Whitney, and this is Hunter, and this is Cody. Um, and they lived with their mom in Olympia. And in the summertime, we would all gather to be as one as a family. So as I got older, my bond grew with my siblings, but I was kind of wild, and I lived in Wyoming, and I became addicted to methamphetamine at the ripe old age of 16. By 17, I was a full-blown drug addict. 18, I found myself sitting in a jail cell. But that's actually a story for another day. At age 20, I decided to get married to my high school boyfriend, who we were deeply involved with drugs. And so my father came to my wedding after his own divorce with my stepmom, Charmin, and the twins were 5, and they were all in the depths of a nasty, nasty custody battle. My dad stayed home with them for most of their life, and at this point, he had a back injury, so he spent most of his time with them, and he was pretty much their nanny. So as you can imagine, the divorce really took a toll on these boys. They pretty much tore the kids apart. They were ripped from their family home. It was just kind of a tumultuous time for them. And my dad expressed deep, deep regret and fear for what would happen to them both without both present parents, because they had a very structured life. Luckily, they had a decent support system within their grandparents and their uncle and their aunt nearby in Leavenworth. So it wasn't that far away, and my stepmom went to go live back home with her parents there in Leavenworth. And so we were in Wenatchee, or my dad was in Wenatchee at the time, and they were in Leavenworth. And my dad didn't want to lose his weekend and evening visits with them due to his job. He was a real estate agent. And he saw I was kind of going back down this dark road of methamphetamine abuse. So he offered me a way out. So the day after my wedding, my first wedding on August 12th, 2006, I said goodbye to everything I'd ever known in Wyoming and my family, including my beloved Grammy, who I lost back in November. I watched her wave goodbye, and most sadly, on my way out, as I moved to Washington with very little notice, I announced at my wedding that we were leaving. So the next day, we bailed. And at my wedding, everybody was high on everybody in my wedding party except for me was high on methamphetamine, and it was just it was very needed, so my family understood, but it was just really hard because I was very much a family person, very deeply ingrained in my family. So I came to Washington ready to get away from the drugs, and I did for a time. And I became the kid's nanny. And here's me and my brother Zach, my sister Whitney, and then Hunter and Cody, and then the twins. Hunter is always the one smiling, and his smile just would go for miles, I tell you what. So my job was to take care of my brothers on the weekends, and during the week, if my dad was working, he was a real estate agent here in Wenatchee, and we all lived in the same house. And I spent a lot of time with them, teaching them how to play video games on the GameCube, reading books, doing art projects, crafts. We loved camping and swimming, and just really having a good time. We were always out having fun. Here I am again with the boys, Hunter and his big smile. And then we've got Cody and Hunter, Darth Vader for Halloween, and my dad and the boys. We always would go outside and enjoy it together. Well, one day, their family got upset that I taught them how to play Grand Theft Auto on my Xbox because there was guns and stuff, and they were banned for seeing me for 2 years. So during that time, their mom got into another relationship, and she moved from Leavenworth to Walla Walla, and that was in 2009. And that changed their life forever. So they really only got to see my dad probably about once a month if he was lucky. But it really changed the boys forever being separated from us, because we were kind of the fun family. We were a little unit. And, as you can see here, this photo, 2011. So they moved in 2009, and then 2011 was the next time I saw the boys again. And as you can see, this is Hunter here, and here is Hunter. They don't look quite as happy. It was the first time I'd seen them after a few times of being banned from their lives completely, and I could just see the change in their faces, especially Hunter's. He went from always smiling boy to one you could hardly get a smile out of unless you really tried. I mean, you had to really try, but when you try, man, he would smile, and we were kind of I was kind of the one person that could make him smile, just because I was always kind of picking on him. And his life took quite a turn after this photo here with his hair all funny. Um, he found out that he was diagnosed with stage 4 rhabdomyosarcoma, which is cancer of the muscles. He underwent a year of treatment at Seattle Children's Hospital. And during the entire time, he just never, ever complained once. He never uttered a complaint of it. I remember going to see him and he was pulling his hair out and he was having chunks come out and he was like naming the chunks and he was like just really good spirited about it. I couldn't believe how good spirited and how much he took it in stride. So on February 25th, he completed his treatment and he went back home. And he endured many hardships throughout his life. He had tons of surgeries. He had a bunch of lymph nodes removed in his belly, his back. They had found the cancer originally in one of his in his private part areas, and that was taken from him as well. And he had scoliosis, and he had to go through back surgery. The kid had just gone through a lot at from 15 to 17, but you wouldn't really know that if you talked to him. You could see it on his face, but you wouldn't really know it if you actually engaged with him because he's just such a good spirited guy. He attended the opportunity program at his high school in Walla Walla, and he was a senior in high school when I got this call this very day 7 years ago. This is the last picture of us together. My sister's not present here, but this is me and my two brothers on Christmas Eve 7 years ago. Here's the boys when they were little, always smiling. He's always smiling. And here is him, Hunter, with his wig on after he lost his hair to chemotherapy. So I got this call from my stepmom, and I knew something was wrong because I never got a call from my stepmom, to see her phone, her name pop up on my phone. I knew something was going on. So I needed to answer. So I answered, and I was in the middle. I think I was actually chatting or with my husband, who's my husband now, my boyfriend at the time. And I just remember her saying to me, "They're moving his body. He's gone. He's dead." And I was like, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. I didn't really understand what she was trying to say to me. So I had to repeat herself because it was like, "What are you talking about? He's cancer free." Like, I kind of knew it was Hunter, but I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about?" And she said again, "They're moving his body. Hunter's dead." And all I remember after that is my knees hitting the floor in a puddle and screaming my lungs out until absolutely everything was black. And I thought perhaps that I would just die myself in that moment. The devastation that I felt was just beyond what I ever understood could actually be possible. And I've had a lot of death since then, but I haven't felt just my heart break in that manner since. And it just haunts me to this day. The days that follow were a blur. I remember going to his funeral and sitting with his body at the wake for like hours. And, me and my siblings, we just coped by taking pictures of him and just all this crazy stuff. And we just couldn't leave his side. And it was just awful. And his mom had another child. And during the whole funeral, she was just sobbing. And it was just this grim experience that I just, it never leaves my mind, and sometimes I actually have nightmares about it still. But we didn't really know what happened still. We come to find out that he had taken 3 bottles of the sleeping pill Unisom after he found out some girl who actually had the nerve to show up to his funeral with her new boyfriend. He was I think they were dating or something, and he found out she was like dating this other guy, and she basically just played him for a fool, and he was a soft heart, he was just really sensitive, and he just had a momentary lapse of reason and took 3 bottles of this sleeping drug, and he just died tragically. And this was in February, and he was to graduate in June. His identical twin Cody went to check on him, and he couldn't wake him up. And so that was just a really difficult time and so tragic and heartbreaking. And I the smile right here, I always just think of the smile. You always think that the people you love will always be around, especially if they're younger than you. And coping with the grief of him taking his own life after we had almost lost him, I just find myself in suspended animation at times. And while I've worked through the grief, when this day comes around, in the days leading up to this, I find myself just struggling. And so that is part of the reason I started this masterclass, so that I could share and people could share their stories and we could support each other. I'll never forget the last day I saw him, that picture that I showed you earlier. I had taken him, it was Christmas, and we went to my uncle's house, who later also passed. And I remember giving him a big hug. I gave him the biggest hug I've ever given him, and I just remember how frail he felt. And that moment, I think about it a lot, and sometimes I just find myself crying about the strangest things. I'll be looking at the store and see mac and cheese or apple juice, and I'll just start crying. And just little things will make me cry about him. And I've had many losses in the last 7 years, but this one broke my heart, and it left me with so many questions. So, if left unprocessed, grief can have an emotional impact on your body, that feeling of the broken heart. Suppressing or retaining negative emotions, it actually puts direct stress on your body. And this is why we literally have that pain, that we're heartbroken. So this is one of the reasons it's so important to process this grief and to talk about it and to write about it and to chat with each other about it. And it's important. Some people just repress it. So this is a diagram, the path of the heart, that we use here in our clinic. Dr. Tara adopted it from David Hawkins. And it really speaks true of where we are in our emotional journeys. On the path of the heart, living in grief down here, it keeps us in our ego and separated from source and from oneness. And or living from the heart, which is being closer to God, closer to spirit, closer to source. And it really takes courage. It really takes courage, which is right here, to step out of the pain and into neutrality, which is the next step, into trust and acceptance. That being said, it's your guys' turn to share your story. I would like for you to muster up some courage and reflect on a loss that has deeply affected you. And this doesn't have to be a death, and we'll chat about that in a moment. It can be a loss of a job, a home, a partner, expectations, whatever it is that has rocked your world. I want to know what emotions surface for you when you are thinking about this loss. So, Lori, do you want to share with us a loss that you've experienced?
because I couldn't get my computer to, in fact, my computer went totally black. So now I'm looking at this little tiny screen. Um, and now I can't hear you either. Why would that be?
Well, let me see. Can you
Now
hear
I
me? You
can't.
can't. Okay.
Now I can. Okay.
Okay.
My loss was different. It was my mom after a long battle with Alzheimer's and two siblings who didn't particularly want to have anything to do with any of it. So it all fell on me, and I'm the middle child. But it was more, it's really a complicated one. So it wasn't a sadness because she really wasn't ever present, even when she was fully, comprehending things. She was a very vacant person. And you had, as she was starting to go way downhill in the assisted care where she was, they would tell me, it's not going to be very long. You might want to call your brother and your sister and things like that. And this has got to be so hard for you. And it didn't feel real. And when she passed, it was almost like nobody passed because there was so little connection, daughter to mom, daughter to dad, even my siblings. And it wasn't as though she was incapable. She had a sad, sad life and we knew as little kids that she didn't like being a mom. But then you go through this process of everybody saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. What can I do for you? This is awful. And this must be so hard." And in a way, I didn't have those emotions that most people would have when someone they love or was close in their family. So it's awkward, I guess, and then you feel like, what's wrong with me? I should be grieving. I should be sad. I should feel something. And it was just like empty. So very
Wow.
different than most, right?
Yes. And that reminds me of my recent grandma's passing. She was in an care living facility and had a stroke and lost her mind a few years ago. We really lost her years ago. And so I feel like my mom would feel very similar to how you're feeling with your mom because she just wasn't there, and it was like almost you almost grieved it long ago. And so this
Mm-hmm.
residual grief
Mm-hmm.
that is there becomes it becomes more numb, and
Mm-hmm.
so but that's still grief, that is still a form of grief.
Yeah.
Um so um in thinking about that story that you just shared, how did you respond when she passed? Was it just, it felt surreal, or did you cry?
No,
Yeah.
I didn't cry. She got violently ill before she passed all the way. And I had to leave the room while all of that was happening. And my daughter happened to be there. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't watch this. I can't. And my husband and his mom didn't even know my mom, but she happened to be visiting because it was really close to Christmas. And there's his mom's holding my mom's hand, you know, and I'm feeling more love and connection to her. It was just so awkward, really awkward. And there was not any abuse, other than more like just not really present in your life. You know, you always had to kind of tippy toe around her because you didn't want to upset her and have her cry. And then dad come home and be mad at us because she was crying. And so it's always about her and her needs. And as kids, we just when we got to like about fifth grade and you might spend the night with somebody else and you watched how other people's parents were, you were like, wait a minute, what? What is this? This is cool. You're so lucky, you know. Yeah, and it just bubbles everything up. And then why my brother and sister dumped it on me, they weren't there. So
Have you cried since about her dying, about her passing?
I think a little bit, but not like what you went through with just that wrenching. And that's what everybody,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't really tell a lot of people that this was my life. It's,
Mm-hmm.
and even the residents are like, oh, your mom is just, I mean, not the residents, but the caregivers. Oh, your mom's so wonderful. We just love her. She's the best. And you're like, she is. it, it was the weirdest scenario. You didn't want to go, I don't really know her, but okay. I'm glad you do. So
Yeah, and
I feel like maybe I'm not gonna be in the same zone as others who maybe are tuning in, but I understand it's just for any kind of grief. But I guess I never really grieved it, and I don't know if I'm supposed to. I don't think about it very much.
mhm. Maybe more about grieving the relationship that you never had with her, and that's
That
more, yeah, because I hear you say that you didn't really know her, and it sounds like she never really gave you an opportunity to know her, and
kind of. I mean, but it was like an aunt that you see every once in a while,
yeah,
and that's the bond that you have but you live with this person.
right,
Yeah.
right, absolutely. So, do you think that processing through that loss of relationship, the opportunity to even have the relationship, what do you think would help you process that? Do you have a good relationship with your children?
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that
Really.
probably made it more important for you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. Have
And
you ever journaled about this stuff?
no, no.
Okay. I have a really cool grief journal that has some prompts that I'll send to you that might help you through this process because even though it feels um, like maybe you've done your grieving or you're disconnected from it, I think it would really help just to move through that and really bring to the surface of what was missing, and then it can bring you full circle, you know?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in defining grief, and there's a range of loss in experiences, and that's what you were just chatting about. Everybody's experience is different, right?
Hmm.
When we talk about defining grief and understanding the range of loss experience, we're really going into a complex and deeply personal aspects of everybody's lives. We've both just shared two examples of very different experiences, which are valid. Those are valid grief experiences. It's not a one size fits all emotion, but it's a multifaceted response to a loss that varies widely among people. And as the class fills up and we have other people sharing their stories, I'm sure we'll have other people that connect to your story in that way. And I know your story sounds very similar to my mother's story with her mother. And there was a deep grief of not having the mother present throughout her lifetime in a manner that um, was conducive to her growth. Because my grandmother was very selfish in a lot of ways and was a drug addict for a long time. And so I feel like my mom and my uncles grieved the loss of her many years ago before she ever even passed or even had the stroke because they never had that experience with her that other people shared, and I had a very different experience with my grandma. We were very close, and I knew, knew parts of her that my mother probably never did. And
Mm.
so that in and of itself is um, an area of grief, just the grieving of not having the relationship there. And so how does that bleed off into the rest of our life, right? Like how does that come out in other ways? And how can we show up in a way that um, we are correcting those legacies, so to speak, right? And it sounds like you're doing that work with your children. You're being more present. And sometimes that happens where you're more present and you're correcting that generational legacy. But the intensity and duration of grief, it just varies greatly, and it's influenced by the relationship to what was, and what was lost, and the circumstances of loss, and the individual's emotional and psychological makeup and generational legacy. Um, Generational legacies and generational trauma, it goes through families, and some of that is just stored in the body. There's this really good book called The Body Keeps the Score, where um yes, you've read it. Yes, where
I opened it and I read some,
yes. What'd you think
and
of what you read?
I it was hard for me because it seemed, I don't even remember if I like opened into the middle and kind of was, or started at page one. I can't remember. But I remember it was a lot of just awful abuse and I thought, I don't need any more negative in my main or what do I want to say, mindsets or pictures happening, and I had to put it down. I
Yeah.
couldn't keep going. And it was actually my sister's daughter discovered it. She's like 26, and she said, "Mom, you need to read this book. It's amazing." So then my sister was like, "You need to read this book." And I tried, but I still have it, and I still could dive into. I thought about like, well, skip ahead,
Yeah.
but I never did.
Well, the concept is that when trauma happens, our body stores that trauma. It's all energy, right? And so when we have things like grief or trauma, it gets stored in our body and it manifests in different ailments. And so that's basically the gist of the book, is that when we don't work through our trauma and our grief and our our different emotions that we've experienced that are negative, it gets stored in the body. And so then it manifests as disease. It can manifest as something so simple as, you twist your ankle, or, have cancer, or whatever it is. It can manifest because you're not processing through it. And so the thought behind it is in order to get rid of physical ailments, you need to get to the emotional piece and process that stored trauma. And grief is trauma, and
Hmm.
grief is trauma. And so the goal of this masterclass and the coaching group is that we process this and we talk about these things. And sometimes there aren't these profound realizations, but then later on, just by talking about it and even acknowledging its presence, those ailments will go away because they're being released. There's another great book that Dr. Tara likes to recommend. It's called Letting Go by David Hawkins. Yeah, and that's where this graphic came from, and it's a great one of letting go of those stored traumas and those emotions and grief. I would highly recommend that to anybody who is dealing with any sort of trauma or loss. So having processing grief and having a better understanding of what grief actually is, because grief isn't just, oh, sadness and crying and anger. Grief is apathy. Grief can come out as apathy. I mean, and being numb. I've had, in the last 7 years, I have lost over 10 people. And I will tell you that when my grandmother died, while she was one of the most prominent people in my life, and she was like my person, you know, that person that always loves you no matter what. When she died, because of her state of mind, some of the trauma I endured because of her sickness, and because of just all the stuff we went through, even though we were very close, I had apathy. I don't know that I cried when they first told me. I don't think that I actually cried about my grandma dying until I went home to Wyoming for her funeral and made the slideshow for her funeral. And I think that's when I actually first cried, and that was like a month later. And so grief doesn't always show up as breaking down and crying. It sometimes manifests as apathy. And so when we can recognize that, and we can recognize that we have a little bit of death apathy or whatever, we can move through that, and we can go from a place of um, grief to courage to talking about it, and then working towards joy, love, and joy and peace, and having a peace within ourselves. Um, do you feel like when you think about your mom, what's a feeling that comes up? What's the first feeling that you have when you think about your mother passing?
Sorrow, meaning
Mm,
sorry for her,
mhm,
because it the chain of events, she never felt like her parents really loved her. She always felt like the younger sister and the older sister were valued more, or kind of fawned over more, or whatever. And she always said she was sort of the black sheep of the family. And so anytime she talked about her own parents, it wasn't really all that great. She never was just blatantly rude about them, but um, it was very apparent that the other two siblings in the family got a lot of attention. And my mom, she said, I had to iron my older sister's prom dress and help her get her hair all fixed up before I could get myself ready to go to prom. It
mm.
was an expect that, like she felt like Cinderella a little bit, like in do all the chores are your job, because the other two are um don't need to do that. I guess
Yeah.
I like, we're just going to pick you. You get to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she started out with, I mean, I'm sure she didn't know how to do it well, because
Mm,
it wasn't modeled for her in the first place. And that's where my brother and my sister and I have said, we got to break the chain. We cannot pass this down to our kids. We can't. And so we worked really hard not to, and I think that we did a really good job.
praise God. Praise God.
Yeah.
That is,
So just sorrow, like what a sad life.
yeah.
I can remember my mom lived, let's say, 8 blocks from my son's kindergarten school. And my dad had already passed. No, he hadn't. He was still with us. The school called me. I was at work and said, your son's running a really high fever. His throat's really sore. We need you to come and get him. So I called my mom, knowing it probably wasn't going to work, but I said, would you buzz up and go get Eric and bring him to your house? Because you can get him out of the school quicker than I can. I'm going to have to find a substitute, write the lesson plans. And she goes, well, actually, I'm getting the Thanksgiving table organized right now. Okay, Thanksgiving was like in 3 days. And then I said, Mom, he's sick. He needs to get out of there. Will you please just bring him to your house? And she said, well, I don't even know where the front door is to the school. I said, it's right. The flag is right by the door. It's not hard to find. And then I just said, forget it. Never mind. And hung up.
Mm. So you couldn't rely on her. There was a,
No,
yeah. Have you ever written her a letter?
no.
Okay. I have some homework for you. Oh. I have some homework for you. I want you to write her a letter, and in that letter, I want you to tell her everything that you're feeling, everything. And this can take days if it needs to, but I want you to tell her all these things, all the grievances, air your grievances. And then at the end of the letter, I want you to write about what you love about her. I want you to look at all the things that you loved about her and all the things that you appreciated. And then when you're finished, you can burn it, you can flush it, but I want you to get rid of it. I want you to get rid of that letter, and you're going to let that go. Let all of it go. And that's going to help you move from a place of sorrow into more of a place of, you're going to courage and the willingness. When you're doing it, you're going to willingness. Let me share my screen again so that we can go through this together. Okay. Do you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So sorrow and grief live down here. That is where we're at right now in our grieving process. And so starting to write a letter puts you at courage, because you're beginning the process of letting go. This is the process of letting go. And so writing that letter, you'll feel some neutrality pop up, probably a little bit of the anger, and a little bit of more grief and guilt and shame. But in that process of writing the letter, you're going to find acceptance. You're going to find some acceptance for what happened. And then once you go into what you love about her, that'll go here to love. And then once you get rid of it, hopefully that'll bring us to peace. And so in this process of grieving and writing the letter, you're going to go through the whole spectrum, and it's going to help you just let it go and get to a place of love with, and I'm not saying that you're not in a place of love with your mom, but there's still that sorrow, right? And so the sorrow is overshadowing that place of love and just peace in knowing where she's at and where you guys were at in your lifetime. Because it's a big jump to go from sorrow to peace, and that is how that's how we start the process. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to just happen overnight. But writing that letter, make it as long as you want. But the touch points are your grievances. Air your grievances. You need to air those grievances. And then make sure to also say what you loved about her and what you miss about her. And sometimes you have to really reach deep.
Mm-hmm.
But think about the things in your life of who you are, what you've taken with you. Because there are probably things that you have brought into your own personality and your own life, the way that you do things, that she gave to you. What do you love that she gave to you? Or what do you love about your siblings that she gave to them? And then maybe think about what were the things in the end of her life, perhaps that the people she was being cared for by, what was it that they were seeing that you didn't? Is that something that you feel like you can do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it will be hard, but that doesn't mean I'm not able to do it.
Yeah, it may take you days. It might take you days.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, it might take you a process.
I'm trying to write some notes here. Sorry.
No, you're fine. But that is something, if you guys are watching on the replay, if you are experiencing any sort of grief, even if you were like me and broke down on your knees and your heart was broken and you had a good connection with that person, this letter will help you to move through that process. So that what that would look like for someone who is grieving a loss that of somebody that they were more connected with, is you would just talk about all the things that you loved and appreciated, and you would air your grievances, but that wouldn't be the focus of the letter. It would be more focusing on what you really loved about them and what you are bringing forward in the world, that they left you. Because really, the one thing that rings true for all loss experience um, is just the we experience and who we are, how you show up in the world is you are not just your thoughts and what you come up with. We are an accumulation of every touch point, every person we've ever encountered, every show we've watched, every book, and we have made a conscious, unconscious decision to show up in a certain way. And all the people in our life that have contributed to that have left their legacy on us, and it's our duty to have that ripple effect in the people we love's lives. And one day we are going to be the ones that are grieved. And how do we want to be? How do we want to be viewed? And how do we want people to grieve us? Do we want to have them have sorrow because they didn't connect with us? Or would we like them to be celebrating? You can either be in sorrow or celebration. And so those letters that you're writing is going to reflect that for wherever you're at in your stage of grief. So, as I was saying before, grief it's an internal and emotional response to loss, and it has a lot of variety of feelings, from sadness and anger to guilt and despair. It's not a one size fit all emotion at all. Um, I have had many uh, deaths, and each one was very different. I've had very many losses, and each one was very different. And so the range of loss is what highlights the fact that grief can stem from any form of loss. It's not just death of a loved one. Death of a loved one is often the most highlighted form of grief, but grief can look like completely different. Maybe you haven't lost someone, but maybe you have ended a relationship or had a divorce. That's a significant loss. A loss of a relationship, it is involves grieving on a different level, not only grieving of the person that you lost, but the future and experiences that will no longer be shared, and the hope for what your life might have been. Even a job, if you lose a job, that is a loss of safety or security, that can your financial security, your career aspirations, that can trigger profound grief. I've lost a job before that I thought I would be in forever, and it really put me through a year of grief of who I thought I was. And sometimes we just have to adapt and embody that and return. And you always need to ask yourself, how do I want to show up in the world, and what generational legacy do I want to leave with my ripple effect? And that's how I try to show up. I was a drug addict, I was a meth addict, I was a pot addict, I was a pill addict. I've struggled. I've struggled with how I'm showing up because I've had such deep grief and trauma. I didn't know how to live in a place of love and joy, and instead I just lived out of my ego and guilt and shame and grief and fear, and I had to really do the work, and I had to really surrender. I had to surrender myself to something bigger than myself, and I try to remain neutral in these coaching sessions, but I will say um, God has had a big, profound effect on my life. And I've had many inspiring moments that have reminded me that God is present. And that gives me hope in knowing that maybe one day I might see these people again. And maybe not in the way that I know or think I will, but I don't know if you saw my story yesterday on my Facebook. If you're not on my Facebook friends list, you probably did not. So I'll share this story with you, Lori, because I don't think we're friends on Facebook.
But I would like to be. So
Yes, please send me
how
a
do I find
request.
you?
Lacey Watson. And I am in the Happy Gut Hub. I'm the admin. You can add me from there too. If anybody's watching on YouTube, yeah, you can go to the Happy Gut Hub on Facebook and you can post your stories in there. You can watch replays in there. I will have resources available in there. It's called the Happy Gut Hub because we have 4 pillars of health, and we start with the physical body, and all health starts in the gut. The gut and emotions are really the big pillar. So the story I'm going to share is really inspiring. So I am wearing a couple of things right now. This is my brother Hunter. This is his ashes.
Oh,
Yeah, this is my brother. I
oh wow.
carry him with me. I carry him with me. But this ring, so this is my grandmother's ring. And just the other day, um, just like Monday, I was wrestling with God, and I struggle with New Ageism, and full disclosure, I was a Satanist, and I was a witch, and I was in witchcraft, and I was very heavy into witchcraft for a long time. I was an occultist. And I was really heavy into witchcraft till I was like 36, like just about 2020 was the year I stopped. And the reason I stopped was I had seen some great, really horrible, traumatic things in the world of human trafficking, but I won't go into that. That's a story for another day. But on Monday, going. I had a Bible study I was supposed to go to through my church. I'm in a mentorship program with an elder of our church, and it's a women's mentorship program. And I missed the first meeting, and I've been kind of like not doing the work, because I've just been not doing it, and putting it off. And I asked my husband, should I go? He's like, yes, you should. He's being very supportive, but if you make a commitment, stick to it. And I'm wrestling with God. Why am I doing this? Are you even real? Like, where are you? I'm having some things going on with my health, and like, I'm like, what's up? And I'm like, where's my grandma? I miss my grandma. Like, did my grandma go to heaven? And I show up to this Bible study, and my mentor is there, and I sit down, and I notice that she has a ring on. And I thought to myself, I have that ring. My mother gave me this ring. My mother gave me this very ring. She was wearing the exact same ring, this ring. And she said it reminded her of the Star of Bethlehem. Well, the thing is, my grandma lived in Wyoming. My mentor is here in Washington, and they bought these rings in like the 90s or 2000s or whatever. And what are the odds? So I really, what are the odds? So I took that as a sign that my grandma's still out there, and God is real. And I've had many signs like that. When my brother died, um, there's a Norse legend about twin crows, and I think it's Hunan and Yunan, and they bring the news to Odin every morning. And right after Hunter died, I kept having 2 crows follow me. To this day, I have 2 crows that live in my yard. And everywhere I go, all the way to his funeral, I had 2 crows. I had flocks of crows, but crows were following me everywhere I went. And then when my uncle died, this one is really crazy. My uncle died suddenly, and I'll get to that story in the next couple days. His is really sad, but when my uncle died, he was a Christian, and very good Christian man. And on his deathbed, when he was in the hospital, he was singing this song, "In the Eye of the Storm." And I was with my cousin going up to his. We were driving to his burial plot at the cemetery, and we turned on the radio, and wouldn't you know, "Eye of the Storm" came on the radio right on the way, and I could not I believe it. So there's been many times, if you just ask it, and so shall you receive. Um, so I am a big believer in God, and if you're watching this and you're part of my masterclass and you're on, a neutral path, that's your path. I am not here to sway you one way or another. I am here to give you tools. And so I will be talking about God quite a bit in my testimony. So I apologize if that triggers anybody, but that is something that I am very passionate about. So all that being said, we need to acknowledge the different types of grief and different types of grief experiences, because everybody needs to have support, right? It highlights the different types of support. You might have different tools, that are being brought forward. If you're in a different place of grief, if you lost a divorce or a job or something like that, the tools might look a little different, but the outcome and this path of the heart is the same. Like the path of the heart is the same for us all. We need to go from a place of ego and separation from God and that guilt and the shame and the grief and the fear to a place of oneness and the being operating from the heart. And so we can show up in the world in a way that creates a ripple effect and a lasting generational legacy to inspire others to do the same. Because our world is broken. And we have to show up and have courage to do the work. It takes courage to do the work. So my message for you all today is that it takes courage to move from a place from grief and shame and guilt to peace and love and joy. And grief is not a linear process. It's a lifelong journey. From the moment you get that grief, from the moment it is given to you, it is a lifelong journey, and use it as a learning process, as a learning tool to help you move through your various stages at your own pace. It helps you to grow. That's why I called this grow through transformative tears, grow through what you go through. Because a lot of people just like to sit in their poopy diapers and whine about it. My mom loves to use that analogy. Don't sit in your poopy diaper and cry about it or not change it or not have a change. We must either be vocal to have a change, or we must need to do something we must have massive action to do something about it. It takes courage to act. So there's no right way to grieve, and this process is highly individual. You may be falling on the floor, you may be apathetic. That's your journey. But the process of getting to a place of joy and love is the same. We just have to have courage to do the work. So the goal of grief recovery is not to ever get over the loss. You're never going to get over it. There's no getting over that mountain. It's there. But we can climb that mountain and we can integrate that experience into our life moving forward. So tomorrow, we're going to have day two. I'm going to give an introduction to the grief recovery method as we continue my story of grief and loss while sharing your experiences. If you're unable to make it, there's always a replay. If I show up by myself, I'll share my story and I will give you the tools. But I really love the immersive. This is meant to be an immersive and immersive experience for you all. And most people don't understand what I do yet because I've been doing it in person for a long time, and this is my debut coming online with Tara. We've worked really hard to create online courses that you guys can move through your healing journey wherever you're at, whether it be your physical body, your emotional, mental, or spiritual. We have something for you, and we want to meet you where you're at. And so I am just here to listen, and I am so glad that you showed up today. Thank you for showing up, Lori. I really thank you.
You're welcome.
And
You're very welcome.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, I really, it's kind of odd when you mentioned the class. I was sort of like, well, I don't know if I'm really grieving, but I thought just dive in and see what this is, and I had no concept that I was going to talk about my mom or anything. So it just
Great.
came about. Yeah, I was really thinking I was going to be on a different kind of wavelength, and it just went there. So I rolled with it, thinking must be why I tuned in.
That's right. That's right. Spirit knows. Spirit knows, and just stay in tune with that. And I encourage you to write that letter. And I doubt that you'll get it done by the time this class is done, but you can always share that with me in your own time, and we can process that together if you'd like. If you want someone to read it to, you don't have to, but I'm here for that if you'd like to. But when you're done with it, make sure to get rid of it, because that's the letting go part.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yep. So, and you can share this with your siblings as well if you feel like this is something that they need. Share this with anybody. This is meant for everyone. So, I wanted to give some value, and in the next coming days, I have some really cool tools. I'm going to try not to go. I'm going to be try and be respectful of everybody's time. But if we do have a full class, sometimes when people share their stories, it goes a little over. But I'm actually really thankful that today it was just you and I so that we could go a little deeper with you. And I'm always holding the intention that whoever's meant to show up will, and that we
Yeah,
will work together. And
yeah.
sometimes it's better this way. So if you
Mhm.
have anybody that you think to benefit for tomorrow, we're meeting at the same time, 1 o'clock, Saturday and Sunday.
Maybe one friend
Yeah,
going through a divorce. Well, she's past the divorce, but it was
that's
several years ago, but she's still pretty stuck. And I know she's working with a really great counselor and such, but sometimes
yeah.
just a little different
Yeah, I
protocol
bring
structure can spark something. You never know. I can tell her
yeah.
about it though,
That'd
for
be
sure.
great. And I'm not a counselor. I don't even pretend to be. I've just been through it. And so I've been divorced. I've lost jobs, pretty much any sort of grief. I've been homeless. I've been a drug addict. I've just been through it in my life experience. And I've worked in naturopathic medicine since 2008. I worked for Dr. Jacqueline Thomas here in Wenatchee for 10 years. And then I worked at Leavenworth Family Medicine for a few. I worked with Dr. Allegra Hart. And now I work with Dr. Tara, and I think I'm going to be here for the rest of my life, hopefully. So I really just love naturopathic medicine, integrative medicine, and I love to share with people how it's changed my life. So
Well, thank you. Thank you for
yes,
inviting me.
absolutely. Thank you for showing up, and I hope to see you tomorrow.
You will.
All right,
Okay.
great. I will see
All
you
right.
then. All right,
Okay.
everybody. The replay will be available on YouTube. I will send it in your inbox and it will be in our groups. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Ciao.
Bye.
Until next time. Bye.